we can all agree that the first round of college football playoff in the 12-team debut was underwhelming. So I really wanted to speak my piece on the college football playoff. I watched majority of the games, and I have some opinions on each one, while also having an opinion on the playoff format in general because it's new. It's a 12-team playoff system. So the first one I'm going to do is Notre Dame versus Indiana. Uh Pretty self-explanatory game. Like you knew what like as soon as the game started, we had an idea on which team was going to win. I felt like it was very very one-sided, and Indiana kind of rallied at the end to kind of make it a 10-point game. That's what the end looked like, but it didn't feel like a 10-point game. It was 27-3 at a point. That's the real score. Curtis Rourke, he just kind of crumbled in the moment, man. He just couldn't find his composure, found himself in tight spots, and, threw an interception in there too. Caught me by surprise. I'm not going to lie, guys. I did not have a lot of faith in Notre Dame because I didn't know who they really played. Like they had one good team or so in their resume. Like their strength of schedule wasn't super strong. So I was looking at this game to be relatively even, but Notre Dame showed that they have a really good defense, which I think is going to pose problems for Georgia next week. So that's going to be very, very interesting to look at. But moving forward, I think Indiana has a good future. Their coach got paid a ton, so he's going to have to recoup and get back into recruitment. Maybe trying to find somebody in the transfer portal that could help the offense in these type of situations, because that's the second time that they faced a ranked opponent like Ohio State, and now it's Notre Dame, where the defense is doing relatively well, but the offense cannot get it going early enough, and they try to get it going late, and it's too late, right? Okay, so my next game is going to be SMU and Penn State, right? And this is kind of the same thing, except SMU could not rally at the end. They kind of rallied by throwing 10 points in the second half, but by that point, the game's already over. There's no chance of you coming back. There's no chance of you winning. And it just, again, Penn State, we already knew who Penn State was. I thought they were going to win this game, but I had more faith in SMU at least rallying at a certain point to try to get the game a little close, but they just couldn't get it going. Jennings just nightmare game for him, man. I mean, 3 picks in the first half, and it was 2 picks in the first half, and then I think it was another pick in the second half, and it just ruined his confidence. I mean, he couldn't find rhythm. The pressure, Abdul Carter, these guys just find ways to win, right? Find ways to get to the quarterback every time. He couldn't find a way to scramble. He couldn't find a way to run. The Penn State was shutting down defense. Everything SMU wanted to do on offense, they could not do. They just could not do. But I give them a lot of credit. The coach, I give a lot of credit, right? They found a way to get here. They found a way to get there, right? And that matters. That matters. I like Texas a lot, and I think that they need to be challenged as a team for us to see the best version of them. I think we saw the best version of them in the first round. I still think there's another ceiling they can get to, but this is the best version of Texas that we need to see if they have a chance to actually contend for the Natty, right? And I think that Clemson was a really, really good matchup for them, because in the first quarter, Clemson attempted to punch them in the mouth, right? And they got the early score. Then Texas responded. And then from there, Texas just started to pour it on in the second quarter. By then, it was 28-10. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this game doesn't look like it's in the reach of Clemson. But when the second half began, Cade Klubnik kind of put on a cape, right? He threw a touchdown pass that got the score to be 28-17 at that point. They got the ball back after playing good defense, and Cade was making great throws, throwing it to Brenning Stool, throwing it to another receiver down the seams that got them down into the red zone. Clemson had a chance to get the game to one possession. It would, if they got that touchdown, and they went through 4 goals. They decided to run the ball in I believe like 3 plays. They ran the ball on 2nd and goal, 3rd and goal, and 4th and goal. And it was a QB run at the end on 4th and goal. They didn't even get close. I don't know why they decided to run it. Cade's been doing pretty good. Keep throwing the ball. But if they got that score, if you look at it, it's 28-24 and a lot of time left on the clock. If they can get another stop, they're in the game. They're absolutely in the game. They have a chance to win. But that stop on 4th and goal kind of set a precedent because now Texas went back down. They kicked the field goal. They got to the 4th and they scored a touchdown, right? And at that point, the game's out of reach. It's now 38-17, right? Clemson scored another touchdown to make it 38-24, but by that point, there's not much you can do. So hats off to Cade Klubnik. I think he outperformed Quinn Ewers in this game, and I think that just shows moving forward, like Texas, they gotta get better at the QB spot, or at least polish some things. They're really good. Quinn Ewers is good. He's great at throwing passes in the mid range, but he has to get better at throwing deep passes, playing a little bit off script when things are not going the way they should for Texas. Tennessee versus Ohio State. Now, again, right? I kind of wanted Ohio State to have a challenge, but Ohio State to me is right. Like they're so far ahead of a lot of the teams in the playoff, outside of like Penn State, outside of Oregon, outside of like all the teams that you know are highly ranked. I think Ohio State can contend with these teams, right? As you saw in their schedule. And I wanted to see Ryan Day win a big game. This is a big game because you're in the playoff. It's one elimination, right? And for them to come out the way that they did in the first quarter is and just demolish Tennessee early, right? And Tennessee tried to rally in the second quarter, which is why the score at half was 21-10. And from there, 10 Ohio State found a way to score more points. And from there, it was just like, all right, it is what it is. Like, I think the game was just kind of given away at that point. Nico Maliava, he did what he could, man. I mean, he ran the ball in to help Tennessee. He got 2 rushing touchdowns, but he could not throw the ball to save his life. Not that he can't throw, but the defense of Ohio State on their receivers was just so good. Their highest, the receiver on their team, McCoy, had 40 yards. That's the highest of the team. They just could not get the ball out in the air, which kind of made it limited for their offense to perform. And that's kind of what led to them not being able to do what they needed to do, which was stay in the game and at least try to win it. Ohio State kind of ran away with it early on, and it kind of stayed that way. So now Ohio State has a real challenge headed up in front of them against Oregon as a rematch, right? And for me, I'll leave my predictions for another day, but I'll just say that I'm repping for Oregon, right? There are 2 questions that have to be asked about this first round, because we can all agree that the first round of college football playoff in the 12-team debut was underwhelming, non-thrilling, right? A snoozer, right? If you want, whatever words you want to use in your mind, like that relates to the word of underperforming. That's what you could argue, right? And I can agree with that. Right? And one of the questions that popped into my mind as to why that happened was, did the committee get it wrong? And I don't think, if you ask my opinion, I think Miami deserved to be in. I think Alabama deserved to be in. South Carolina deserved to be in. Right? Ole Miss deserved to be in. But now with that, and I get what the committee was trying to do here, right? I understand you're trying to have some fairness, because a lot of the teams that I just named out are mainly SEC teams. If we're gonna have a playoff with mainly SEC teams, then shoot, you might as well call it the SEC playoff. There's no college football in it, right? So I understand they're trying to be fair with their choices on who is allowed in and who's not. But frankly, if you wanted to ask my opinion, I honestly believe Clemson's the only team that actually deserved to be there. All right, SMU looked like a fraud. Tennessee, I think they kind of deserve to be there. They'd be second on my list, but they just couldn't get things together. Indiana, huge, just couldn't get things together, right? They crumbled in the moment, right? And you would want, as a fan, to see action the first week, right? You want to see action the first round, but to my rebuttal to that, and that's because I prefer the 12-team playoff. I think the 12-team playoff is better. And that leads to my second question that people would ask, which is the 12-team playoff a fraud? Like, is this just an experiment that kind of gone awry? We got to crumble it up, throw it in the garbage, crumble it up, throw it in the garbage, never to be seen again. It's an aberration. We'll just move on. It never happened. No. I don't think the 12-team playoff is a fraud. In fact, I still think it's a really good thing for college football. One of the reasons why is because we had one of the best regular seasons in college football in a while, because their stakes were much higher. Teams had a reason to fight after week 7 because they knew they had a chance, if they went out, to be in. All right, so that's one of the biggest reasons. The second reason to me that it mattered is because now we get to see if there's teams that deserve to be in and teams that don't deserve to be in. Right? When we had a 14 playoff, the problem with that was too much brand bias, okay? And way too much popularity in recruitment, right? Too much leverage in recruitment, too much leverage in brand, right? That's kind of the biggest things. Every year when the 14 playoff was going on, I know Alabama's out of it now, but it was Alabama, Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State. And if you weren't those 4 teams, right? If you weren't those 4 teams, and I know Michigan threw themselves in there towards the end of the 14 playoff era, but if you weren't those teams, then the discussions of you being in is almost non-existent. You're not getting a chance, right? You're just not getting a chance because you're not Alabama, you're not Oregon, you're not Ohio State, and you're not Penn State, you're not Michigan. Like you had maybe 2 teams or 6 teams in total that were in discussion, right? We had Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, and you kind of throw somebody in there that's a toss-up. Like the 6th team is like a toss-up one, right? And I understand that one, and that's pretty good. But now that we have a 12-team playoff, you get the certified 4, which in this case would be Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon, right? You want those 4. But look at the landscape. Like once those 4 were in, and that was not easy, right? Especially Georgia. It wasn't easy. But because they won their last game, they were allowed to get in. But, outside of those 4, we now have another 6 to 8 brackets, right? Or spots where teams can get a chance to make something happen, right? That's why Boise State now was able to get a bye, right? Boise State was able to get a bye, and that's something I didn't even expect to happen, right? Thanks to Ashton Genty. Right? Gotta shout him out now, right? Might as well shout him out now, right? And seeing teams like Arizona State get a bye, right? Like seeing teams like that get a bye, and then we also see now we got Notre Dame in here, Indiana, SMU, Tennessee, right? Clemson was able to find a way in there. Like next year is going to be super, super interesting to see who is the last 4 from 9 to 12 that actually get in, right? Because I think there was other teams that got left out, but due to their losses, you can't do anything about that. You gotta stomach that, right? Wins matter. Wins do matter. Strength of schedule matters. And I think that it can throw off people when you look at some of the teams that got left out, because hey, well their strength schedule was so much better than Tennessee's. Their strength schedule was so much better than Indiana's. They were so much better than SMU's. But SMU and Indiana were able to win out a lot of their games, especially games that may have came down to the wire. But Miami, for example, did not win out against Georgia Tech. They did not beat Syracuse, right? You got to beat these teams, right? You got to beat these teams, and it really matters. It really does matter. Notre Dame kind of like them losing to Northern Illinois in the beginning of the season made me think to myself, well, are they really a worthy team? Even though they won out from there, to me it was like, well, are they really a worthy team? And the first round kind of showed me, okay, there's some confidence there, right? So that's why that's why I think it's a good thing that the 12-team playoff does exist. I think it should still exist, even though we had a lackluster, underwhelming first round. I think it should still exist because that gives teams a chance to compete. We want to see more college football. We want to see it matter more. We don't want to see us play a full year of college football and only know after week 10 or week 8 the 4 teams that are in, and that's it, right? There's no ambiguity. There's no wondering if the next one's going to come. That's when the 12-team playoff kicks in, and now we have parity. We have parity, guys. That's what we're looking for. We have parity. That's the biggest thing about this. So in my eyes, I think it's still good. I understand that the week was not very, the weekend wasn't very fun because these games were all kind of quick. I think the Clemson game was the most interesting, but it's okay. It's okay. It's the first year. I think that it's fair because let's be real, when you're a really good team in college football and you show it, like Oregon is in a class of its own, right? We can argue that's in a class of its own. Ohio State, class of its own, right? Penn State, class of its own, right? We could argue that some of these teams are just so astronomically better than everybody else. But as you get farther and farther down the bracket, you see where the human is, right? You see where the evenness and the fairness kicks in, right? And I know this year we didn't see it, but I guarantee you next year we will see a lot better of a first round because the committee will not make mistakes in choosing who they should or shouldn't have in the playoff, right? And so I'll just leave off by saying we have 4 games next week, right? We have Texas versus Arizona State. We have Ohio versus Oregon. We have Penn State and Boise State. And we have Notre Dame and Georgia. I'm not going to make my predictions now. I'll do my homework, and I will come back with some predictions as it moves on. I want to thank everybody for stopping by, everybody for watching. This is my first time doing Curse Reacts to the college football playoff. I will try to make more coverage of it as the playoff goes on and until it finishes. So, with that being said, I'll see you all later. Peace.